Welcome to the France 24 debate. I'm François Picard. The 85 richest people on the planet earn as much as the poorest 3.5 billion. If, for instance, Mexican telecoms tycoon Carlos Slim, who tops a rarefied rich list, was a country, he'd be the 7th richest in Africa. His family worth $73 billion. A report by Oxfam, which highlights the study of a group of economists, shows, on the eve of the World Economic Forum in Davos, how those 85 super rich, who are getting richer, by the way, could squeeze onto one double-decker bus. Not that they take the bus. So why is the growing gap between rich and poor not more of an issue? 2 years ago, when the financial crisis was in full swing, movements like Occupy Wall Street rued the so-called 1% who control the world's economy. The talk was of salary caps, reining in bankers' bonuses. But that's not the trend today. Take France's socialist president, who last week scrapped his tax the rich mantra in favor of tax breaks. This in a bid to encourage bosses to hire. How do you reverse the trend and narrow income inequality in today's world? Today in the France 24 debate, as the rich get richer. With us to talk about it from Davos, we'll be joined shortly by Felix Marquardt, co-founder of Europeans Now. She's the author of We the Peoples of Europe. Susan George of anti-globalization advocacy group Attack. Thank you for being with us. Thanks as well to Michel, the former head of communications for the World Economic Forum, who's in Paris today and not in Davos, but we'll hear more about what it's like at Davos. And from Brussels, business consultant Sony KAPOOR, managing director of Redefine. Thank you for joining us. The France 24 debate. You can always join the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Yes, let's start the show in Davos with France 24's Markus KARLSSON. Markus, is income inequality on the agenda there?
Well, François, I've been here for a total of 3 years now, and for every year that's gone by, I've been hearing more and more about the issue of inequality. So it is certainly on the agenda. Whether or not business leaders are merely paying lip service to the problems, as the critics say, I don't know. It's difficult to see behind their spiel, so to speak. Earlier, though, I did talk about this with the founder of Wikipedia, the internet and online encyclopedia. His name is Jimmy Wales, and we talked about the issue of inequality and how it plays into Davos. Jimmy Wales, he's interesting because he's just bought a significant stake in a UK-based telecoms operator called the People's Operator, and it gives 10% of its revenues to charity. It gives away 10% of customer bills. And Jimmy Wales, he says that thinking socially, thinking about the environmental impact of a company is becoming more and more part and parcel of business. Let's listen in.
Rather than social responsibility being something that companies do as an after effect or an afterthought or an add-on, which people have been quite rightly a little bit cynical about, we now have the opportunity to have actual good, solid business reasons to do these things because consumers care.
But a lot of people say that if a businessman has the option to go down the socially responsible role, but it will cost him a lot more money, a lot of people say he's actually not going to choose that option. He's going to go for the other option that will cost him less money and perhaps be less socially responsible.
Some will, some won't. But I think that's why it's so important that as society is changing, as consumers have the information, they have the ability to tell others about a company that's doing something good or a company that's doing something bad. It becomes much harder and much more costly for a business to not do the right things.
Okay, that was Jimmy Wales speaking to me a little bit earlier. It's also worth mentioning that the World Economic Forum itself, it has actually put the growing gap between rich and poor, growing inequalities at the top 10 list, or in the top 10 among its top risks for the global economy. So it is certainly on the agenda here.
When you say top 10 in terms of risks, what are those risks?
Well, the perceived risk is that if inequalities continue to grow, if the gap between rich and poor basically just becomes larger and larger and larger, it will undermine the entire capitalist system in the end. People are simply not willing to participate in the capitalist system as consumers if they are seeing managers of big global companies, people with a lot of money getting even richer, whereas their incomes are becoming smaller and smaller. So that is how the World Economic Forum at least perceives that risk.
All right, Markus KARLSSON, many thanks for that update from Davos. Let me begin with you, Sony KAPOOR, in Brussels. Front page story today was this report, these economists, that was highlighted by Oxfam. Your thoughts on income inequality? Has anything been done at all to try to reduce it since the financial crisis broke?
No, the truth is absolutely nothing, at least nothing of any substance, some symbolic gestures here and there. And if anything, the rules of the game combined with, once again, re-globalization and technological change have further tilted the landscape towards an increase in inequality, particularly at the extreme levels. And so I think that the big structural debates need to be addressed in the future. And in some ways,
hang on, you say technological Sony KAPOOR, you say technological change. Why is technology part of this equation?
Well, for two reasons. That at one level, technology is contributing to the hollowing out of what used to be middle-class, white-collar jobs, many of which can either now be outsourced or can be automated. And so you are seeing, and this is one of the big factors that is going on in the global economy, the hollowing out of what used to be the white-collar middle class on the one hand. The second reason where technology comes in really important is because technology offers scale. So things that could only once be sold locally, if you look at firms, particularly in, for example, the IT sector, be it Yahoo or Google or Amazon, etc., they're essentially global firms. So technology significantly reduces the threshold for entry into the global market, which means that any returns that you get are now generated, at least in, where technology plays an important part at a global level, whereas this was not the case before. And technology in this similar way also applies, particularly to the financial sector, where those billionaires living, for example, in India or China or Russia or elsewhere, not just in the United States and Europe, more or less make their money from the global economy and use their peer group of billionaires in other countries as their benchmark. And they are the people they hang out with, whereas the rest of the world around them, for example, if you look at the streets of Mumbai or Delhi or Rio de Janeiro, etc., is left in an increasingly poor state. So the inequality has never been so much in your face as it is, particularly in the developing world now. But in the developed world, this is mostly showing up as a hollowing up of the middle classes.
All right, we have a reaction from Chris on Facebook saying a lot of outrage at the findings of the Oxfam report, but the reality is, I'll put this to you, Susan George, these 85 people, these 85 super rich, have added massive value to the lives of even the poorest people.
I'm sorry to say that's simply not true. And I'm glad that Oxfam has been able to seize another image and say 85 people equals half the world, that's fine. But we've been doing this work for 25 years. We saw this coming. And every year there is a report or two or five that say, yes, inequality is increasing. And whether you measure it between countries or within a single country, it is increasing. And in some places, it is reaching, in the developed world, Dickensian levels. Now, when you say these people have added huge value, first of all, GDP doesn't mean anything in inequality. The most unequal country in the world is Namibia. it's how much do you have to share or not share that counts. It's not the GDP. And most of the riches of those people have come from financial transactions which add practically no social value to the income of the country. And it is the sharing of whatever riches there are that counts. Now, if you look at the way the riches are going up in the United States, all of the gains since the crisis began in 2008, 96% of that has gone to the top 1%. And Oxfam is right to talk, in last year's report, they talked about the 0.1%. It's not the 1%, as Occupy Wall Street said. It really is in very few hands, that some would say 5,000 or 6,000. But the reports that I like to read are the World Wealth reports or the Credit Suisse reports on how much money there is out there and who has it, because that will tell you a lot more than the reports on inequality. Yes, there's outrage. Your first commentator was quite right. But the outrage is focused on the wrong things. It's studying the poor. We should be studying the rich much more, because they are not contributing to reducing it. They can say they're shocked. Davos can put it at the top of their risk list, but that doesn't mean they're going to do anything about it. And we know what to do about it. It's a political choice if there is so much inequality.
To do about it is?
Taxes or caps.
Taxes or salary caps.
Yes.
Michel OGRIZEK, you heard what Susan George said. You heard earlier what Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, said, how, well, some people among those attending Davos will be up for giving away, spreading out more of their wealth, and others won't, that it's just human nature.
Yeah, I would like really that we stop focusing on the 85, the 100, the 120 super rich. I don't care, to be honest. What I think we should look more what is going on, really. For example, since the last decade, the new money has replaced the old money, which, by the way, generated a lot of issues financially, because the new money do not behave like old money. That's the first thing.
So what is new money?
New money is entrepreneurial, is people dealing, for example, you get new money on the internet, or you create new technology or new innovative tools and so on. So you are entrepreneurs. You are not old family established, getting the dividends every year, And it has moved, it's changing. For example, is the Gulf, region, in the Arabic Gulf, you look at private equity, trying to turn this old family business, locally established or regionally, into a global world. So all money is disappearing slowly but surely. And by the way, the behavior of new money is at stake. That's the first point. The second point, which is very important, who is rich, who is poor? Here in France, with 883 or 7 euros, you are considered as a poor guy in France. But believe me, with 887 euros, you go to Bangladesh, you are quite a wealthy man, okay? So the problem is, where are you rich and where are you poor? If you look at sociologically, the rich here, you are rich if in France you earn more than 3,000 euro per month. What does it mean? With 3 kids, with, education, with taxes. The problem here is that the middle class is vanishing, is shrinking. And that's a problem for the health and democracy, by the way, of society. And the last one, the young people are getting increasingly poorer, because jobless here, like in Spain, like everywhere in the world, by the way. And, and in debt, the graduates in debt are usually in debt in the US. They start their life, in debt. So paradoxically, the retired people today in our Western world are richer, are the rich, and the young people are the poorest. And let me finish here, are you rich when you are in debt? Canada is considered, perceived as a rich country. Do you know that, for example, is the most in-debt country in the OECD world, with 16 or 17% of elderly living in poverty. So you see what is not at stake here is not the revenue, is not the property. I don't care that somebody is earning 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 billions. The problem is a gap which is enlarging.
The gap is growing.
The gap and the shrinking of the middle class, and more important, the real issue we should discuss, I hope, with Suzanne, is the distribution. The issue is a distribution of wealth in a society. It's not the total money that people get, is the redistribution of the money and the wealth in societies. Not in a global world, abstract, so in societies. And that's the issue.
A comment on Twitter, how can anybody possibly advocate more tax cuts for the rich when faced with a statistic like this? Again, you were saying cap salaries, tax.
In Switzerland, they actually had a referendum about capping salaries at 12 to 1. They lost.
12 for the
12 for the richest, one for
the lowest employee, and 12 for the highest.
But it's not salaries so much, although the top executives and U.S. corporations are getting 500 times the pay of the average worker now. So it is also salaries. But I think we have to. I can agree that the middle class is being hollowed out. But why? I mentioned the Merrill Lynch wealth reports. They track the high net worth individuals every year. There are about 12 million people who qualify. Now there are 12. At the beginning of the crisis, there were 8 million. So there is more people who have got more money than ever before. At the bottom point of the crisis, this collection of high net worth individuals had about $32 trillion. This is 2.5 times the GDP of France or of Europe or the United States. Now they are at 48 trillion. They've gained 40% in numbers and they've gained 40% in wealth. Now they're at 3 times the GDP of the US, 6 times the GDP of China. And this is the population equivalent of Greater Paris. Let's put it that way. So this is a really tiny group of people, geographically spread out, still mostly in Germany, Japan, the United States, but more and more of them in India, in China, and so on. And statistically, we can show all of this. But I think this bores people, so they prefer to know that it's 85 people equals half the world. Okay, fair enough. But there are many, many other issues to discuss, because what does inequality do to a society, including the rich people in it?
How do you reduce inequality? How do you pinpoint it? We'll be picking up on those points when we come back. We're going to have to take a quick break. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.